Hey everyone, I'm Natalie, and I'm going to be discussing about radio and why it's still important in our society. So I kind of used a tongue-in-cheek phrase. If you're familiar with the band Queen, you know they have a hit song called Radio Gaga, and the big punchline in the song is they say, all we need is Radio Gaga. So I thought, why not incorporate that? Because as a society, we need radio. I've been involved with radio since I was 14 years old. I began broadcasting in public radio in Rochester, New York. And fast forward now, I work in radio part-time when I'm back home. I broadcast on news radio, as well as television. And I also am the general manager of our on-campus radio station, 90.9 FM WONY. So radio is a huge part of my life, and it's so frustrating to me when people think that radio is this outdated medium and this kind of old-fashioned, old-school thing that nobody but your grandparents listen to. So I pulled some data from the US, I pulled some data from the UK, and we're gonna put this all together and figure out why radio is still really, really important in today's society. So, first things first, I'm just going to go over some definitions because I might use some industry terms and they might be a little confusing. So the first one is terrestrial. When we talk about terrestrial radio, we're talking about radio that is on Earth. So if you can picture that radio dial in your car, or if you had an old-fashioned radio, that is radio is being sent from radio towers that are literally on the planet Earth. Your local radio station is most likely a terrestrial radio station. Satellite radio, the biggest example I can give is Sirius XM. That's radio that's broadcasted through satellites that are actually in our Earth's orbit. So there's no radio towers planted on the ground. It's all in the Earth's atmosphere. Streaming, that's your Apple Music and your Spotify Premium. Those are all data that's through a flow, basically through computer networks. There's no physicality to it. Radio is the transmission and reception of electromagnetic waves, and those waves carry sound messages. So that's why we can hear radio, we can't see radio. And demographics, I'm going to talk a lot about demographics between the United States and the United Kingdom. That's your data relating to populations and particular groups within those populations. So I tried to make the definitions a little bit more mainstream so that we can understand what I'm talking about. Like I said, I've been in radio for 7 years of my life. So I wanted to make sure people really understood what I was talking about. So the first thing is streaming killing the radio star. This seems to be the biggest threat to traditional radio is the digital wave, right? This big tsunami that's taking over the industry. Things like Apple Music, Spotify kind of absorbing the younger generation and kind of that's their main focus. When you see a 15-year-old, are they listening to the radio? No, they've got Spotify up, they've got Apple Music up. The other big thing is because those programs are so embedded on apps on your phone, it's making things like using a CD in the car less popular. So if you remember when you were a kid, your parents might have been flipping between the radio and the CD. If you're on your phone, chances are people have already pre-programmed a playlist, or it's their Spotify playlist, so it's already their favorite songs. So there's no reason to be flipping between your phone and the radio. It's just your phone. So the phone kind of focuses all of your energy, and it makes you just less likely to listen to radio. So that's the big issues with streaming. Because of the phone, and your streaming allows you to kind of be in control of what songs and what content you listen to. So that is truly the biggest threat to radio. So some facts and figures. Anything that's in the green, white, and black text, that's all from Nielsen. Nielsen is probably the most reputable source for data analytics in regards to broadcast medium. I love Nielsen, so I'm going to use their data a lot. But that's only for the US. So you'll see the US data in contrast to the United Kingdom data. Both of these studies were done in 2019. So we're finding in the United Kingdom, 88% of adults, that's 48 million people, are listening to the radio on a daily basis. Kind of an upsetting figure is that 840,000 people between the age of 15 and 24 have permanently shut off radio. Those are people that have either don't listen to music or have kind of been completely reliant on those streaming services to get their music and content, they're not listening to radio. Basically, they're a lost cause. They're not coming back. They've already gone. We are seeing upsetting data from the United Kingdom, seeing that listenership has dropped 29% in the last decade. So a little upsetting, but if you hop across the pond, you'll see how in the US, that data is actually contrasting. So we're seeing that 93% of teenagers are listening to the radio in some way, shape, or form. We're going to jump over to our adult section, ages 25 to 54. That demographic, almost 99%, almost 100% of the population is listening to the radio on a monthly basis. We're going to talk a little bit later about why that might be, but just to kind of put some numbers in your head and understand. It's saying that, so music-based radio stations, so pop, country, and then AC is adult contemporary. Those are the top formats in the United States, and I'm sure you can understand why. Obviously, pop music is huge. Country music, we have a huge percentage of the population that listens to country music. I'm not going to like stereotype people, but think about why country music might be popular. And then adult contemporary, that's your John Mayer, your Jason Mraz, Sarah Bareilles, really good feel-good music that people want to listen to. So that's a really good figure and helps kind of people think why radio might be popular. So jumping ahead, if you thought about it, why so much of our population listens to radio? It's because they're listening to it in their car. 70% of our radio listenership happens in the car. A little bit later, I'm going to talk about why the car is so important, but just to look back, 70% of our listenership is in the car. But a unique figure that I found is that 57% improvement of online radio listenership. Online radio really saved terrestrial radio especially because it gave people a way to listen to their favorite radio stations, but all they needed was internet access. They didn't need a physical radio. So if you ever go on your local radio station's websites, you'll see they have an online broadcast player. Woney has one if you've ever gone to Woney's website, and basically gives listeners the option to listen to radio, and all they need is an internet connection. It's making radio so much more accessible. So we're seeing listener ratings go up because the accessibility is getting hitting larger and larger segments of our population. So online radio really has done a lot to save terrestrial radio because it's giving people the option to listen to radio, but at their desk, at work, on their phone at the gym, whatever, they don't need that physical radio. I just want to also clarify that you can still have terrestrial radio and have it be broadcasted online. It's just a different program. So whether you're listening to terrestrial radio online or you're listening to Sirius XM online, online radio is still helping to kind of keep that longevity of radio alive. So we found that this company, WorldDAB, who facilitates the adoption and implementation of broadcast digital radio, that's your online radio just in like professional terms, we're seeing that listenership is up 15.5% in the United Kingdom from January, which that, again, when you talk about accessibility and more radio stations and companies going online or having an online component, that's only going to raise listenership. I can't tell you how many times I've wanted to listen to, Z100 or Q104 out of New York City, but I'm up in Rochester. I go online, I Google search it, I get on their website, and I'm able to listen. iHeartRadio is one of the best companies as far as online radio because they have every single radio station up on their website. So you can listen to them wherever they are in the world. Staying current with the times and trends is been able to save radio. So it's really exciting for us. Again, we would just want to send it home that so many people, like 92% of Americans listen to radio. That's a general population. Everyone in the US, 92% of people listen. Country, news, talk, adult contemporary, news and talk is directly related to the podcast boom. So, podcasting is increasing, has a 46% popularity increase, and public radio has seen a 30% revenue increase. Revenue increase we can directly relate to popularity increase. I'm going to jump to the next slide about podcasting, and I'll talk about public radio too. So podcasting is basically the pre-recorded version of a radio show. People record their content, upload it to Spotify, SoundCloud, any sort of audio hosting service, and everything from current issues to interviews to cooking shows, or, just one of my co-hosts in radio in Rochester has a podcast called Positive Blatherings, where he literally just spews out positivity for 2 hours once a week. Podcasting allows people to kind of stop and start their show, so you don't have to worry about missing a huge chunk of information because you shut your car off, or you're not driving anymore, or you're not listening anymore. You can pause, come back to it. That's been really popular. And the more individualized and independent programs just make people more interested in podcasting and make it more relatable. Public radio has really been adopting podcasting, which has directly related to their increase. So when you think about NPR, you're seeing those podcasts, and because podcasting is growing and public radio is growing, you see those two things kind of intersecting and seeing both markets rise. So why is radio relevant? You see that graphic, radio actually hits more people than TV. The darker green is your younger generation, your lighter green is your older generation, and the two greens in between represent your middle generations, just as a point of reference. So radio is relevant because it's accessible. Basically, anywhere you go, if you're connected to the internet or not, you can hit radio. Radio in most cases is free. So when you talk about socioeconomic factors, radio is one of the most accessible mediums. You don't have to lean in. We always talk about leaning in radio. Basically, you don't have to work to listen. You can put it on the background, kind of focus, pop in, pop out. It's mobile. You can have radio in your car when you're driving. You can have radio on your phone, wherever you are. All you have to do is listen. You don't have to expend a lot of energy. Radio is resilient. Radio has been around in almost 100 years as far as a popular culture and a news gathering source. So it's gone through it all, and it still comes out on top. And radio is also relatable. You can find almost any genre of music, almost any artist. Like my favorite artist, Dave Matthews Band, they have their own Sirius XM radio show and channel. Of course, I tune into that all the time. You have hosts on radio shows that have personalities that relate to us and relate to life. And radio allows us to come together through the love of music and sharing news and coming together. Even if you can't see the people, you can feel that energy. And that relatability is what makes radio so unique. And in my opinion, is what has made it last. You can listen to radio as you're getting ready in the morning. You can listen to radio on your commute to work. And I think between the shows and the hosts and how it reaches communities, reaches people of all walks of life, is what makes it so unique. So I get so frustrated when people say that radio is dying, because it's really not. The way we're listening to radio is changing. The way that we're receiving information is constantly updating. And I'm so proud of this industry to see it kind of move forward and grow and move and change with the times. And as someone who's been broadcasting for a huge piece of her life, I truly believe that we need radio. We love radio, and I'm so glad to see it kind of still prosper and blossom and come out on top. There's my works cited in case you want further information, and thank you for listening to my student-led topic.